Incoming message.
All right, welcome back to another explainer. Today we're putting on our detective hats to investigate one of the absolute most astonishing official government headlines to hit the news in June and July of 2026. Look, if you've been paying any attention to the news lately, you already know that the conversation around unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, has completely shifted. We are way past the era of blurry photos and random internet rumors. We're talking about concrete, undeniable government action. So grab your magnifying glass, because we're going to look really closely at this data and figure out exactly what the government is telling us without actually saying it out loud.
So in June 2026, the Trump administration officially appointed a Harvard astronomer to lead a brand new formal government UFO disclosure panel. Now, if you check sources across the board, we're talking PBS, The Washington Post, all the way to defense.gov, you're going to see this exact same headline trending. And this is incredibly important because it confirms that this topic is absolutely no longer a fringe conspiracy. It has officially crossed the threshold into formalized government policy. The White House literally established a council, and they've put a very, very specific academic in charge of it.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this quote is the absolute crux of our entire investigation today. The mainstream reaction to this news has mostly been, wow, no way, we're finally getting UFO disclosure. But when you look a little deeper at the source material, a very different picture starts to emerge. The main argument being made by analysts right now is that the government isn't just setting up some council to blindly search the skies for mysterious lights. No, they are looking for something highly specific. They aren't hunting for organic anomalies, they're hunting for engineered technology. And to understand why that distinction is so monumental, we really have to look at how this council is operating.
Which brings us right into phase one of our investigation, the White House UFO panel.
Let's break down the timeline of these recent official actions, because honestly, the sequencing here tells a fascinating story. On June 12, 2026, the third tranche of declassified UAP documents drops into the public domain. And right on the heels of that release, Avi Loeb is officially appointed to lead the disclosure panel. But you know what the most revealing detail is? It's his very first official act. He didn't point telescopes at the sky, he didn't ask for new funding to launch satellites. Nope, his first act was asking the Pentagon for classified files. He's asking for data that the military already possesses. And you don't ask for a file unless you have a pretty strong suspicion that it contains exactly what you're looking for.
That takes us straight into phase two, the trans-medium shift.
Now, what's really interesting here is the definition of this word. The Pentagon has officially adopted the term transmedium. It describes an object that can operate seamlessly between the air, the water, and possibly even the vacuum of space, all without any visible, conventional means of propulsion. Just think about the physics of that for a second. The friction of our atmosphere, the dense, crushing pressure of the ocean, and the absolute zero vacuum of space. They are completely different environments. You just cannot have a biological, organic creature that flawlessly transitions between those extremes at high speeds. It's biologically and physically impossible for a natural phenomenon. For something to survive and operate in all three of those mediums seamlessly, it has to be engineered.
Notice how the military's phrasing has evolved here. In the past, we always talked about unidentified flying objects. And that term, it leaves a lot of room for natural atmospheric anomalies, right? Weather balloons, weird cloud formations, optical illusions, stuff like that. But in 2025, the Pentagon's UAP task force deliberately shifted their language away from unidentified and heavily toward transmedium. Neutrally speaking, based entirely on our sources, this vocabulary shift implies a definitive leap. They've moved from looking at things that might just be weird weather to looking at things that display clear hallmarks of artificial engineering and advanced technology.
So we know they're looking for engineered technology. And that leads us perfectly into phase three, the megastructure expert.
Let's walk through this chronological escalation together, because it is wild. Way back in 2007, the Department of Defense quietly begins its UAP task forces, just collecting data. 10 years later, in 2017, this bizarre interstellar object named Oumuamua passes through our solar system, accelerating in ways we couldn't easily explain. Then, in 2020, Avi Loeb publishes a highly controversial paper arguing that Oumuamua wasn't a comet at all, but an artificial engineered probe. Mainstream science heavily criticized him for this. I mean, they practically called him crazy. But look at what happens next. In 2025, the Pentagon shifts their official terminology to transmedium, acknowledging engineered capabilities. And then in June 2026, the government actually appoints Loeb, the exact guy mainstream science ostracized for his artificial probe theory, to lead their official panel. The scientific community might have dismissed him in 2020, but the Pentagon clearly didn't.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. Avi Loeb does not study fuzzy lights in the sky. He doesn't study weather anomalies. His explicit scientific expertise is in identifying artificial megastructures, theoretical constructs built by advanced civilizations to harness the energy of stars. That is his wheelhouse. When a government deliberately hires a specialist whose entire career is focused on how to detect engineered alien structures, the undeniable implication is that they already know exactly what they're looking for. It's like, well, you don't hire a master plumber to inspect your house unless you already know for a fact you have a problem with your pipes.
And that logic drops us right into the final phase of our explainer, what they already know.
Keep in mind, the Defense Department has been running these UAP task forces since 2007. That is nearly 2 decades of continuous, heavily funded data collection. According to the source material, the government has been sitting on an absolute mountain of evidence. They've got high-definition military footage, they have advanced multi-sensor radar data tracking these objects moving at frankly impossible speeds. There are even claims of physical materials. They've collected so much hard data over the years that they simply can no longer dismiss these encounters as atmospheric anomalies or equipment malfunctions. The evidence of transmedium engineering is already in their possession.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate conclusion drawn by our sources. Just look at the logical progression of these steps. Step 1. Over the last 20 years, you secretly collect irrefutable evidence of transmedium engineered objects. Step 2. You go out and hire a controversial but highly credentialed Harvard expert who specifically specializes in artificial extraterrestrial structures. And step 3, you appoint him as the lead of your new council, effectively making him the public face of confirmation. You see, disclosure isn't happening because the government suddenly decided to just be transparent. It's happening because they found something they can't explain away, and they need a renowned professor on the record to be the one who formally identifies it to the public.
Which brings us to the geopolitical urgency of this entire situation, 90. That is the number of days specifically mentioned in the source material. The clock is officially ticking. The panel has a 90-day window for Avi Loeb to review those Pentagon files he requested and to release his initial findings to the public. Now, that is an incredibly tight turnaround for any government initiative, which again heavily suggests that the real heavy lifting of gathering all this data is already completely finished.
So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. We are standing on the precipice of a potentially world-altering announcement, and it's driven not by internet rumors, but by formalized government action and a Harvard astrophysicist looking at real military data. The government shifted its language to engineered, they hired the expert on engineered structures, and now he has the files. So what exactly will Avi Loeb release in the next 90 days? I highly encourage you to watch the news very closely over the next 3 months, because the answer to that question might just change our understanding of our place in the universe forever. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.
Come to me, chickens! Cock-a-doodle-doo!